Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our youth development series. Today we have one of our officers in the person of Raisa Dukas. She's a public diplomacy officer at the US Embassy Abuja, where she covers American spaces, emerging voices, and education USA. Previously, she served as the senior program officer for the Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration Office of Europe and Middle East Assistance. Our prior assignments include Algiers in Algeria, Beirut, Lebanon, and Quito, Ecuador. Prior to joining the state, Raisa worked directly and as a consultant for several US government agencies, including the US Coast Guard, Department of Homeland Security, and Department of Defense. She speaks Arabic, French, and Spanish. Please let's welcome Raisa as she takes the floor for today's topic, digital productivity tips and tricks for staying organized. Shall we put our hands together for Raisa?
Thanks so much, Josephine, for that kind introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm so excited to talk to you about digital productivity, so I just jumped right in, but I'm glad Prof is there to keep me straight. So I know that you had a session that related to this topic last week, so maybe I'll start with a quick question or two, and maybe I'll ask Josephine and Anduna to help me moderate because I can't see the screen very well. But question number one is, what is one tip that you remember from last week's session? So maybe either put it in the group chat or raise your hand. What's one tip on productivity that you remember from last week? And then question number two, what is one digital application that you remember that was discussed from last week? So question one, what is one tip that you remember? And question two, what is one application? And we'll give everyone a few minutes to put the information in the chat or to raise their hand.
I think we have somebody from Bauchi. Bauchi, please unmute yourself and speak.
Yeah, good afternoon. The tech home of last week is how to navigate the use of technology to improve your skills and to make yourself productive. And the app that I will remind myself or other colleagues is Canva. You can use Canva to do so many things.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. Anyone else?
Any other person quickly?
Sokoto's hand is up. Sokoto, please unmute yourself.
Sorry, we can't hear you.
Yeah.
I think
can you possibly sit down? Maybe you should sit down so the mic can pick your voice.
All right, we don't have much time. We're heading to Abuja. Please, Sokoto, type in your questions, please. Just type in your question. American Center Abuja, over to you, please.
Yeah. Good afternoon. I learned from last week's program what we can use Canva to do, especially graphics. And we learned that we can even sack our graphic artists because of the things we learned from that place. And most interesting thing to me was using Canva to do my slides. That is, instead of my slides for presentation, PowerPoint, instead of being so verbose, that I could use graphics to represent a lot of things, even in that, still convey a better message than writing so much in it. Thank you.
Great. And I think we have one more.
Thank you. I think we'll have one more in Uyo. Will you please unmute and ask your question?
Yes. Okay, thank you for the opportunity. I learned last week that there are a couple of tools that a couple of American tools that I can use to enhance my work and become smarter in discharging my responsibilities. It was actually addressed by Mr. Ozadeh. And some of those tools that will enhance such productivity at workplace or at businesses includes the Google Drive, OneDrive, and the other ones. These are basically tools from the American technology that would really help to make work and business smarter. I also learned about other tools like the one for project management, which instance is the Notion and Trello. So these are very important tools that enhances helping me to work smarter and much better with great productivity. Thank you.
Great. That's fantastic. And I'm really happy to hear so many people able to talk about the concrete tools and the concrete lessons that they learned from last week. I think, this presentation will also include some of the same tools, but I chose to try to structure this presentation on not just about the tools, but kind of how to put together what are your inputs, right? Because I think one of the key things is when you're looking at different digital tools, those tools are only as effective as the inputs that you have. And so what I wanted to focus on for today is how do we stay organized and how do we basically think through the injects, what we're putting into those tools in order to make sure that they're working as hard for us as we are and that they're helping us stay on track. So hopefully that will be very clear in this presentation. So I will note by, and my team knows this, planning and prioritization is always critical, right? So making sure that you are able to analyze your goals, which can be personal and professional, and also being able to identify the necessary actions to achieve those goals, to achieve those objectives, is really, really critical, right? And so when we're thinking about planning, it's about how do you set yourself up for success? How do you make sure that you're being clear in terms of what you're seeking to do, the time frame with which you are seeking to do it. And so here is, again, I think we've already heard Trello and Notion. The other one that I would suggest is Habit Tracker, right? All of these basically help you think through what are the things that you're looking to do, who was assigned to help you, or what are the resources that you need to do what you're trying to do, and what's the time horizon for doing that. So you can see here, I did a screenshot of 2024 goals. These are not my goals, I should note. But I think that they do a good job of really showing how you can incorporate both professional and personal goals into the same tracking system and still have them be very distinct and look very different. The other thing then that comes from that is SMART. I'm not sure how familiar people are with SMART, but when we're thinking about goals, when we're thinking about objectives, making sure that your goals and objectives are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound is critical, because that's the best way to be able to measure success. So if you say to yourself, my goal for this year is to apply for 15 jobs, That's very specific. That's very measurable. That's time-based, right? You've given yourself the 1-year time frame. You've given yourself your goal of 15 applications. That seems like an attainable goal, right? And it's relevant, right? If you're in a position where you're looking for a job, right? That's relevant to a job search. So that right there is as easy as that. It's as easy as that is a really nice, smart goal. And one of the things that I think I hear most often from people when they set goals, either personally or professionally, is I don't want to set a goal that I can't achieve. And so a lot of times people will set themselves a goal that's maybe on the easier side. So, maybe you say, okay, my goal, I'm a really good reader. Maybe my goal is to read 40 books because I don't want to give myself the challenge of reading 50 books because I don't want to try to read a book per week. That's too high. And so they set themselves an artificially low goal and then they achieve the goal. And that's fine. And, certainly achieving any goal is a big success in and of itself. But I encourage you to be really stretching yourself in goals. So maybe it's, I will read 52 books in a year, and that means that I'm making the commitment to read at least one book a week. And, if you don't achieve it, then identify what went wrong or what could be improved upon or what were the competing priorities. A lot of times, I find that the information about why I didn't achieve something is even more important than achieving an artificially low goal because it gives me a better understanding of what my priorities are. Another critical aspect is adopting time management tools. And I think that, that goes back to that T in SMART. So considering the time horizon and considering putting all of your kind of goals in one place. So this can be something as basic as every day I'm going to get up and I'm going to do stretches, or every day I'm going to get up and I'm going to do a morning workout. Maybe once a week, I'm going to go for a walk in nature. Maybe once a month, I'm going to go on a camping trip. Maybe once a quarter, I'm going to, go visit some other state, or once a year, I'm going to do whatever, right? Coming up with the different time horizons is important, and it helps you really have a real understanding of what the time commitment is that you're looking at. I think a lot of times when I talk to people about their goals or about their programs or about whatever their project or career aspirations are, there's a lot of great ideas and there's a time amount that's not really being assigned or valued. And one of the reasons why I think that that's so important is because then we get into tools that work best for actually representing time management. And that can be a digital calendar, it can be a task manager, or it can be a time tracker, right? And if you don't have a good sense of how long something's going to take, or alternatively, how much time you're willing to dedicate to it, you can very often overschedule yourself and overcommit. So I think a key example is, if we're in the workplace, and again, my team knows this, I like to use time blocking, which is one of the techniques that I've listed here in terms of time management. So time blocking is literally when I put everything on my calendar and I tell my team that if it doesn't exist on my calendar, it doesn't exist for me. So if I'm, writing, if I'm doing a project that involves writing, like if I have to be focused on writing something and I can't be answering email, I literally block that time on my calendar to say writing. If I need to be in a meeting, I need to have the time blocked for just the meeting. No, I need to have the time blocked for how long does it take me to get to the meeting? How long does it take for me to leave the meeting? Because otherwise, if you don't have that, then when people are scheduling things, they're just scheduling you back to back to back and you have no break, or you're always running late because you don't have time to get from one place to the other. So time blocking for me is absolutely essential. And being able to time block means I have to have realistic understandings of what time commitment I'm dedicating towards certain activities. The two other opportunities that I identified are the Pomodoro technique and the Eisenhower matrix. We'll get into those in the subsequent slide. But I guess one other thing I would say for time blocking is also really good for actually physically representing on your calendar when you're making time for yourself or when you're making time for personal related things. So For example, one of my colleagues is very disciplined about putting a block on her calendar for lunch, with the idea that she is always going to take a break for lunch. I don't tend to put a time block on my calendar for lunch, and I end up usually working through lunch, right? So being very deliberate about scheduling your personal and your professional things, not that you want them always to mix, but you want to be aware of how they relate, how they can be deconflicted from each other. That's really, really critical. Okay, so a closer look at time management. So in the for me, it's the upper left. I hope it's the upper left for you too. You can see a sample schedule that's time blocked. So you can see where it says meeting, task, lunch, personal task, regular task, meeting, right? That's a great example of time blocking, although I would note that again, there's not like a break that's built in other than lunch. But think about that, like if you're studying, right? Think about how much time you dedicate towards studying. Think about how much time you dedicate to a certain topic and be specific about what that looks like, right? So I'm going to dedicate 1 hour a day to studying AI or to practicing, you know, coding or something like that. And give yourself that physical reminder on your calendar of that commitment and that dedication. The Pomodoro technique. So this is when you're focusing on a specific task and you set yourself a timer and work on that continuously for 25 minutes. So you are committing to blocking off your schedule and you are committing to not looking at anything else. So not email, not texts, not phone calls, not someone coming into the room. You are just working on that activity for 25 minutes. And then you're taking a 5-minute break. And you're doing that for 4 rounds. So it can be that you're doing that for the same task, or it can be that you're doing it for 4 different tasks. But you're basically giving yourself that time commitment of 25 minutes and then a break, 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 and then taking a longer break and then repeating the cycle. So one of the benefits of the Pomodoro technique is that it allows you to do deep work, right? It basically is a way of reducing the noise of all these other inputs, all these other considerations or requests for your time, and allows you to focus on just what you are trying to achieve. I think a lot of times people, and I am guilty of this as well, right? We come into the day with this intention of, I have A, B, C, and D things that I need to do. And all of a sudden life happens and all of these things that weren't on your calendar or weren't on your radar or all these requests for your time come in. And then you leave at the end of the day, or you finish school or you finish studying or whatever it is. And you say, great, I did so much stuff. I worked really hard, but maybe I didn't achieve what I wanted to achieve. By having time blocking or by using the Pomodoro technique or by using the Eisenhower decision matrix, this is helping you manage your tasks and make decisions about how you're managing your time, as opposed to kind of having just whatever's happening be the thing that makes the decision for you. So for me, for example, today I came in with the idea that I'm going to work on a specific proposal. Something came in that was required more urgent consideration. So I took that time block of working on that proposal and I moved it to later in the week, so that I have kept the commitment to myself that for this week I will work on that thing, but it freed me up for today to jump on that urgent thing that came up. The Eisenhower decision matrix is something that helps you, again, triage what is the task before you, what is the workload that you're considering. And again, when you're looking at these different time management tasks, when you're looking at your productivity, right? One of the biggest ways to increase your productivity is, how do you reduce the noise? How do you focus on what you actually genuinely want to focus on in that moment? So the decision matrix is divided into what is important and not important, what is urgent and what is not urgent. So if something is important and urgent, like what came up today for me, then that is something I am doing, right? That's something that gets prioritized. That is something that is happening at the expense of whatever else I might have had on my schedule. If it's something that's important but not urgent, that's when I get to decide, right? So I can either say I'm going to schedule to do it later, or I'm going to decide to do it now. or I'm going to say, yeah, this is something I need to think about, but right now there's something that's so pressingly urgent. Let me just set myself a reminder that I will need to think about how I'm going to handle this later, and let me just free up as much mental space as possible to be able to focus on what I've determined to be important and urgent. Again, one of the nice things about these task trackers that we've mentioned, Trello, Notion, etc., is that it allows you to literally physically move the task to different days, or physically move your notes to yourself about this. So you don't have to keep it all in your head. You don't have to carry that cognitive load of trying to keep all the balls in the air. It allows you to have a centralized place where all of your tasks are located, or all the projects, all the efforts that you have are located. And so then relatedly, right, it just frees up space to be your most productive, because you don't have to worry about all these little administrative things. When something is not important, but is urgent, that's when you look to delegate. And I acknowledge that that really depends on where you are in your position with your work, or with your school, or with your class, but that's so that might not be an option for everyone. But delegating can be helpful in terms of who can help you do something. So if you're studying for an exam and you've determined that that's important and urgent, but on the other hand, you also really need clean laundry, maybe that's something where you say, hey, is there someone in my household that can help me do the laundry so I can continue to focus on this, because it's maybe urgent that I have clean clothes, but it's not as important as studying for the exam. And then, of course, I think the most difficult one for me, which is something that's not important and not urgent, how do I just say no to something? And how do I delete it, or eliminate it, or remove it from my consideration of mental load? I think a lot of times when something comes in, even if I decide it's not important and it's not urgent, it's really hard for me to not still want to respond or be responsive, and still have that be something that is something I'm trying to be responsive to, but it actually is at the detriment of my ability to focus on the work that really matters. Are there any questions at this point? And again, I'll look to my anchors for help with moderating the chat or moderating hands, and not seeing any, I'll press on.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Thanks. So I think the other really important consideration when we're talking about how to organize yourself digitally is, how do you take good notes? How do you make sure that you are recording the important things? And then not only that, how are you putting them in a digital system so that you can use them or access them later? So for me, I am a pen and paper person. I have a notebook. I use it every day. I write notes to myself every day. I write summaries of meetings every day, but it's important to think about what I need to convert into digital notes. So if I'm at a meeting, I will take notes by hand, and then maybe I'll summarize it as a quick paragraph and send it to my boss. So there's an electronic record, so that we have an electronic copy that is something that is more widely spread, that more widespread or more able to be shared than what I just have in my notebook. So there are a couple apps here, right? There's Microsoft OneNote, there's Evernote, there's Google Keep, and then there's also Instapaper. So these are all resources that basically allow you to create a repository of things that you're saving and have that be something that's accessible. I think that there's an echo here, so I'm not sure if we can shut off the hot mic. Maybe I'll do it. Okay. So for me, right, it's important to think about what are links from the internet, what are images, what are things that my team is sending me, what are all the different ways that I can save those things. And then again, it's not just about how to save them, it's how do I create a system so that I can access them in a recordable or a usable way. So creating, important titles, creating titles that I know what this is referring to, creating tags, making sure that I'm being thoughtful about how I organize my information, my ideas, and my documents, creating a structure that will enable me to go back. So For example, I use Instapaper when I see an article that I want to read, but I don't necessarily have time in that moment. So I basically collect all the different links of the articles that I've come across for the week. And then I have an hour time blocked on my schedule over the weekend where I say, this is my dedicated time to reading the news articles. So, if these are articles that I haven't had a chance to read, I will then go to Instapaper and I will open up those links and I'll say, okay, great. Now I can read all the things that kind of caught my interest during the week that I didn't have a chance to look at. And now I'm having the opportunity to look at that and it's all right there for me. I, again, would take the opportunity to distinguish. I'm talking about personal articles for me for the purposes of my job. If I have something I have to read, I have to fit that into the regular work schedule. But to the extent that there are personal articles that I come across that I'm interested in, I put them in Instapaper and then I can click through later and read the full copy, including, being able to read them on my phone and not have them be accessible, like not needing the internet in order to access them. I talked about this a little bit, but I just want to emphasize the importance of using tools that will minimize distractions. So, think about putting your phone on do not disturb. You'll note, like, I think people can hear my email keeps going off and it keeps beeping, which is very distracting to me. On the other hand, I have a chat platform that I use in my office and I was able to set that for do not disturb. So that's not beeping at me while people are trying to talk to me while I'm presenting. My inbox, I could have just closed my inbox and I forgot to before starting the presentation. And so I just keep hearing email after email after email coming through. Making sure that you're doing what you need to really try to create as distraction free an area as possible in your mind and in your workspace is really critical. Because if you're constantly being pulled into other directions, that really limits your productivity. So there are apps like Freedom or Forest that can help you block specific apps or that can help you block more broadly on your phone, on your computer, on whatever, maybe your watch. That can be really useful for just, again, reducing the distractions to free you up to be able to do deep work and to be able to be as productive as possible, focusing on the things that you need to focus. I feel like there's been a lot of emphasis on AI, and so I wanted to be mindful of how that can be effective for productivity. So AI can be a resource in terms of automating repetitive tasks, enhancing decision-making and insights, streamlining communication and collaboration, and boosting content generation. So for example, for my work, I use AI sometimes when I'm drafting remarks or I'm reviewing remarks and I'm like, oh, this doesn't quite hit the tone that I want. And I'll say, here's this section and I'll plug it into AI and I'll say, make this more focused on security or make this more focused on education. And so that can be a great way of, kind of co-writing or co-reviewing with an AI, with the idea that I'm still responsible for and I'm still reviewing the final output. Another great resource is, okay, I've done my, maybe I'm writing something and I've done my writing. I've written, 5 or 6 pages of free flow. Again, just getting stuff out on paper. Maybe I'll then put it in AI and say, take all this, take these 5 pages and consolidate it down to 2. Or, if I have a task that I have to do every day, maybe it's saying, using the AI to help me get started on that task. So I guess the bottom line for AI is that it can be a productivity enhancer. It can also be a productivity diminisher. You really have to be specific and deliberate about how you're engaging AI. And so I think one of the most critical pieces of advice is to ensure that you are leaving sufficient time to review, right? So it's not I put something into AI generates it, I just slap it into whatever I'm doing and move it forward, right? It's how am I building in adequate time to review what the AI has put together to make sure that it makes sense. A lot of AI models tend to be very positive, tend to be, the focus is how to please you. And so you need to make sure that you're going back and saying, okay, where did this information come from? Did the AI make a leap or pull something together in a way that doesn't really make sense? Do I understand the sourcing of this information in terms of getting the answer? So building in adequate time for review, and being really critical about how you think about what the AI is returning is really critical for increasing productivity, for managing your performance, and however else you're using AI. So other productivity reviews, right? The 2-minute rule, tech checks, 10-minute tidy, weekly digital declutter, and the 5-sentence email. Do people know what those are? I'm seeing no reaction whatsoever. So does anyone know what any of these are? Does anyone want to take a guess at what any of these are? If I can go back to my moderators, if they have any, if they can see something that I can't see on the screen.
Security guard at post one.
Nobody's raising hand. There's nothing on the chat, nothing on the YouTube channel either.
So the 2-minute rule, it's if you have if it's something that takes 2 minutes or less, just get it done so it's off your plate. For a tech check, it's setting specific times for when you're going to be engaged in your tech. So even if you are, using a do not disturb for the purposes of, being able to do deep work, even then, even if you don't have a project that you're doing on a deep basis, be deliberate about when you're checking email or when you're checking your messages. Maybe you set the expectation of, I'm going to check email at 10 o'clock, at 2 o'clock, at 4 o'clock, whatever that looks like. So that, again, it allows you to do other work, because our whole lives are not, well, I shouldn't say that. Most people's jobs are not just answering their email. It's answering email and doing whatever activity. So being deliberate in the time that you give yourself to check your email or to check your messages so that it allows you to do this other work is really critical. The 10-minute tidy is to set aside 10 minutes at the end of your day to kind of wrap things up, to clear your workspace, to kind of set or reset yourself for the next day. So this could be that you're taking the time to review your schedule for tomorrow. You're taking your time to sort through whatever papers or whatever has accumulated on your desk or on your workspace. If you're a student, it's, do I have everything kind of packed in my backpack? Do I have the different items that I need? So in the morning, I'm not running around trying to find everything. It's basically kind of how do you pull yourself together to best position yourself so that the next day you're ready to go. The weekly digital declutter, again, is something I do every week on the weekend. It's setting time every week. It can be 10, it can be 15 minutes to organize yourself, to clean up your digital life specifically. So, that can be unsubscribing from things that you don't really use or you don't really need, or you press delete on all the time and, really just get it out of your inbox. It can also be, thinking about how do I reduce the noise, and like maybe I'm, finding I don't use TikTok. So maybe I'm going to close TikTok, or maybe I don't use YouTube. So closing that YouTube channel, right? Just being very deliberate and very conscious about what are the things that you have in your life in the digital realm that are in service of supporting your productivity, supporting your workplace development or your skills, and what are the things that are kind of taking away from that. And then the 5-sentence email is not an easy art, but it is an important one to try to master to the extent possible, which is really challenge yourself to keep every email you send to just 5 lines or fewer, right? It forces you to be succinct. It forces you to really focus on what are the actions that you are seeking, what is the thing that is most important for the person you're sending the email to actually know. And so think about that also as it applies to your communications. So for example, I've been in Nigeria now for 3 months. I get a ton of messages where someone texts me or sends me a message that just says hi. And it beeps and I look over and all it says is hi. And then I literally watch as they type the rest of their message to say, what is it that they actually want to say to me? And so thinking about having like cleaned up, tight communications, saying like, hi, Raisa, hope you're well. I need help with X, or have you looked at Y? All of that in one message just helps make sure that you're being clear about what you want, helps reduce the amount of back and forth, and also reduces the time that someone else is taking to focus on you when maybe you're not quite ready yet with what you're actually looking for. So thinking about how to reduce the emails that you're sending or reduce the content of the emails to just focus on the most action-worthy things is a really critical skill that, again, helps boost productivity. Another thing that, again, I work with my team on, or that I talk to my team a lot about is, sending me an email that tells me, what do you actually want? If it's just saying, for situational awareness, then say, this is just for your awareness. If it's because you want me to take an action, be really specific about what the action is that you want me to take. If you don't know and you need help, let me know. I need help because I'm not sure what to recommend, right? But having those really clear, tight communications in your email will ensure, again, that there's less back and forth, that there's the opportunity to really make sure that we're being as productive as possible and using our time, because I know what you want and I'm trying to be able to respond to that as quickly and as effectively as possible. So those are kind of just, again, general tips to think about for productivity. And I think you can see as well, how can you use some of these time management resources, or how can you use some of these applications to help you with that, right? So maybe it's literally setting yourself a task in Trello or a Notion to say, once a week or once a day, I'm going to do these things. Or, maybe it's sending yourself a reminder on time blocking saying, Sundays at 4 p.m. are the days that I'm going to do my weekly digital declutter. So hopefully you can see how these productivity tips and tricks and apps kind of all work together. But again, I reinforce, or I emphasize that, those tools are only as good as the inputs that you provide them. So I think that's the end of the presentation. And I really just want to open it up for questions in terms of what else can I answer?
Thank you so much, Raisa, for that wonderful presentation. We'll go into the Q&A session now. Please, if you have questions, please type in your questions or raise your virtual hand so that we can give you the opportunity to ask your question. This is a very huge opportunity for every one of you. It's not every day you get Raisa to do this. She's so busy. So please, this is a huge opportunity for us. Please put all of your questions together. Raisa, I'll quickly start with a question.
I think you just got muted.
All right, sorry. I needed to ask them to bring down their voices. A lot of noise in the background here. So the first question I would love to ask before we take follow-up questions from our locations here in Nigeria would be what approaches do you use to set and track measurable goals within digital productivity tools?
Which apps do I use?
Yeah, what approaches do you use to set and track measurable goals within digital productivity tools?
So as I mentioned, I use time blocking as my primary day-to-day, and then that is also helpful because that kind of feeds into how do I have a digital tool to say, okay, if I've said I'm going to do this activity and I'm going to spend, once a month on this, that holds me accountable to, did I actually do that once a month, like I said? I'm a big fan of using Microsoft To Do. That's what I use for my primary tool for organizing my work and my non-work. One of the reasons why I like it is because it allows you to, one, it's free, which I love free apps, but also because I like that it interfaces with my calendar. So if I say I'm going to do this and I can set a certain time, it will block it on my calendar. I also like that it allows me to set the periodicity. So for example, if I say to myself, okay, I'm going to go to the market and buy fresh fruit once a week, it will remind me on a specific day that I've said I want to do this. Hey, it's Saturday, so your task for Saturday is at some point you need to go buy fresh fruit. I also like that it allows me to track other things. So it's like basically my one-stop shop. So I have a list in there that's my books that I want to read for the year. I have a list in there of places I want to travel in Nigeria or restaurants I want to travel in Nigeria. I have a list of, I want to make sure that I'm walking, 7,500 steps minimum a day, right? So all of that, whether it's personal or professional, that's all right there. And it can all be kind of discreetly organized while still being in one application.
Thank you very much, Risa. Let's take a question from Oshogo, then we'll head to American Center. Abuja, Oshogo, please unmute and ask your question.
Yeah. If you have, my name is Emmanuel Tayo. If you have two important schedules and you have one that is not important, do we leave that aside?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I quite heard the question.
Sorry, can you repeat your question again? I'm not sure we heard you.
If you have two important schedules and you have one more that's not important, should you leave that aside?
That's a great question. So yeah, if I have a couple of different competing priorities, then part of what I need to do is have a discussion with my team and with my supervisor about what's the most important. A great example of that is actually this morning, or not even this morning, this afternoon, I had 3 meetings on my schedule for noon, right? I had a meeting with someone in DC, a meeting here to talk about a contract that we're in the process of awarding. And there was also a lunch that was happening that was a work lunch. It wasn't like a personal lunch. So I talked to different stakeholders to be like, what is the most important thing? What really needs my attention? What do I need to be at? And then I said to my boss, hey, I've talked to people. Here's what I propose. And I got his approval saying, yeah, that sounds great. But yeah, a lot of times, and even again, talking to the team here, we have a lot of stuff going on. We have, so many different projects, so many different ways that we're engaging here in Nigeria. And so being able to deconflict is really, really critical. I will say that's another reason why I like time blocking, because it allows everyone to see on my schedule when there's already something there. And so, for example, if someone's like, hey, you have this on your schedule, but I really, really need you to do this at this time, that allows me to have the conversation with the person who already has something on my schedule to say, can we shift this or can I shift this? So it enables me to be more present instead of just missing something or not being conscious of when my time is needed elsewhere. Does that make sense?
Yes, please. Thank you. All right, let's go to American Center, Abuja, then we head to Bauchi. American Center, please unmute yourself, ask your question.
Thank you, our presenter. It appears that this digital productivity you taught us today is just about time saving using various applications. Well, when you begin to talk about using all these applications, which of these applications are we going to use to save time with our computers? Because I don't know, you mentioned I think I want to know the ones we are going to use specifically to do all these things, because I'm just seeing it as just time-saving digital application, so that we can get that digital productivity to stop unnecessary things that might crop into our time, so that we can do the necessary things. So I want to know those applications we can use to get them done. I want to know.
So thanks for that question. I think it's a really interesting one. I don't think of these using these applications as time saving necessarily. I think of them as time management, and I'm not trying to be cute about that. I really see those as distinct things, right? Time saving is I'm trying to do something faster, and certainly there are ways to do tasks faster. For me, productivity is not necessarily about how do I do things as quickly as possible. It's how do I do things in a thoughtful way? How do I do things in a way that allows me to maximize my ability to focus on the task at hand? And so when I think about the use of these apps, it's not with the idea of saving time in that I'm doing something faster. It's that I'm saving time in that I'm prioritizing what I actually need to focus on. And I am allowing myself the space of basically putting somewhere else in a centralized way. What are the other things that I'm thinking about, or what are the other things that I need to be focused on so that I can, sorry. Okay. Okay, so again, it's about basically being able to maximize the amount of time that I'm focusing on something intentionally. And so the reason why I think I've listed so many different applications is because everybody has a different reaction or a different thing that they are focused on, or a different way that those apps work for them or don't work for them. And there are features that each one has that some people prefer over others. So for me, I experimented with Trello, and it wasn't the right application for me because I found that I had so much data. I had so many things that automatically bumped me into needing to have a paid subscription. And I didn't want to pay for a time management subscription. But for someone else, that might be the perfect tool and that might work for them. So I think, again, one of the reasons why we give you the different tools is because it's about finding what works the most effectively for you. Again, from the super low tech for time blocking or distraction blocking, you can just put your phone on do not disturb. You can just close your email, and you can tell your team like, hey, my email is closed. If you need me, you need to physically come to where I am and tell me that you need me. If you're looking for applications as a way of, just turning it off on a temporary basis, you can put your phone on do not disturb. And then again, the other two apps that I listed were Freedom and Forest. So you as an individual who's deciding what works best for you, maybe you experiment with all three and say, I found that even using Forest, I wasn't able to really focus in the way that I wanted. Or I found that I really just need to shut off my phone entirely, in which case I don't need an app for that. Part of, what works best is being able to experiment with what's right for you and what kind of fits for you. And then also I'd say like what pushes you a little bit, right? So it's okay if something doesn't feel just right to begin with. Give it, a month or a couple of weeks and see if it feels better, right? If the discomfort is because it's a new tool or a new skill, or if it's not the right fit because the application doesn't have all the functionality that you want, or it's not helping you achieve what you're looking to achieve. Does that make sense? Okay, I can't see you, but hopefully it does.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
All right. Let's cut to Bauchi. Then we'll move to Lekki. Lekki, get ready. Bauchi, over to you, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for today's teaching. All right, so my question about the time management tools is that, for example, if you have a to-do list, you have a list of what you want to achieve for let's say about 2 weeks, or let's say 1 week, and then something happens impromptu and you have to change location such that you're unable to do the things that you have already programmed yourself to do. What do we do about that, or how can we maneuver such situation?
Yeah, so I mean, I think certainly working for the embassy, right? We can do the best to have as much of a plan as possible, and something always happens, right? So I totally understand. You can have the best plan and something will happen that will totally derail that. I think the purpose of having a time management tool is, one, it makes you conscious of like what is the time that you were choosing to invest in something, and two, it makes it so that you can actually be really cognizant of when you want to reschedule that. So I like, again, an example that comes to mind is I guess like if I'm applying for college applications, right? I can say to myself, okay, I'm going to come home from work and spend 1 hour every day for 5 days applying for college applications. And I've marked that time on my schedule. And then say I come home one day and someone in my family is sick and I have to spend that time taking care of them instead of applying for college applications. I can literally take that 1 hour that I've blocked on my schedule and move it to a different day. So that way it feels like I'm able to prioritize, right? My family comes first over applying for college applications, but I haven't lost that time. I'm still aware that I want to spend 1 hour that I was going to spend on Tuesday another day of the week. So maybe I say, okay, well, I look at my schedule and over the weekend, I have 2 hours that I can dedicate to this. So I will move the 1 hour block that I had for working on Tuesday on this to Saturday. So it allows basically the ability for you to be honoring the goals that you've set for yourself, the time that you're trying to allocate to those goals, and gives you the flexibility to move it where you need to. It also allows you to have the honest conversation of, I have been wanting to do a certification program, and I have been moving that time block now for half a year, right? It's still a goal of mine, but clearly it's a lower priority goal than other things. So it allows me to have an honest conversation with myself about, is this the right time to be pursuing that? Or do I want to put that opportunity on the shelf for now? And maybe I'll revisit in 6 months. So then I can literally take that task in my task list and my Microsoft To Do, and I can reschedule it for 6 months from now, right? So I can say, I'm not even going to think about this for 6 months. I'm going to give myself 6 months to do whatever else I need to do. And then it's not gone, right? Like I don't have to think about it. I don't have to have it in the back of my mind. I just know that I've appropriated some time for it so that in 6 months I will get a reminder saying, hey, did you want to pursue this? And I think that that makes it feel like it's a little bit more manageable. And it also makes it feel like I am making active decisions about how I'm managing my time, as opposed to all these things happening that prevent me from kind of owning my own time. Does that help clarify? Does that address your question? Okay.
All right, let's go to Lekki, then we head to YouTube. I think we have questions from the YouTube. We'll take questions from the YouTube before we come back to those of you who are live. Lekki, please unmute and ask your question, please.
All right, good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Ambassador Iwale Matthew. So this is my question. As a team leader that prioritizes tasks and delegates responsibilities, so in terms of emergency or urgent attention, how do I effectively manage my team member without compromising the quality or time frame?
It's a great question. And I think there's no one answer that works for everyone. So one of the key pieces I think of when I'm looking at how I manage my team is recognizing that everyone has different learning styles and different learning approaches, and doing the best that I can to be mindful of what that looks like. So if, for example, I have a colleague that maybe doesn't feel as comfortable doing event execution, it's how do I build in more time into my schedule to be able to provide them with the guidance and support that they need to execute that event. Or alternatively, right, and it goes back to that kind of matrix, maybe that's something I delegate. So for example, we have a new process that we had to do for how we're spending our budget this year, we're looking at a kind of a different new format than what we typically do. And one of my team really, was kind of the first person to embrace having to go into that new style. I then, obviously had to think about what's most effective. Is it most effective for me to be the one that engages every single person on my team to make sure that they're all comfortable with this? Or since this person has already kind of done it and is very strong, is that something I can delegate to them and have that be a peer resource that can be useful for other colleagues to be able to, learn from their best practice. And so it's not just me having to individually engage each person. So when I think about my team, I think about who is strong in one area and how can they help others that maybe are less strong. Where are the areas that I really need to be the one that's focused on trying to help develop the relationship or help support an individual? And then also, I think even more important, how do I create an opportunity for people to give feedback? Maybe there is something I'm not seeing. Maybe it's, hey, I actually can do this, but the workload is enormous and I'm having trouble prioritizing. So it's, making sure that we have time in place to talk through what are the different tasks, what are the things that are on your plate, and how can I help you understand what the priorities are. I don't know how familiar people are with the State Department, but we write a lot of paper and we require a lot of different offices to review and say that they've reviewed and that they have no concerns with that paper. I literally just had a conversation with my colleague in one of those other teams just before I joined this call where I said, hey, I've sent you 3 things that I need you to review. In case you're wondering, because they're all really tight fused, they all really have a short timeline. This is the priority. I would appreciate if you could look at them. If you could look at this one first, then this one, even though they're all due kind of at the same time, this is the order of what's most important to me and what's most important to the mission. So being able to have those active conversations, being able to review, evaluate, prioritize, and then reschedule stuff, I think is critical for being able to be the most productive you can be.
Thank you, Raisa. So let's take this question quickly from YouTube. It says, how do you maintain such high level of discipline in a work environment that is often volatile or unpredictable?
Sure. So I think part of this just comes, I think that's a very generous description to say high level of discipline. I think it's you do the best you can to plan as much as you can, and then you accept that there are things that will happen that are outside of your control. One of the things I talk about here a lot is how do we do all that we can do to reduce surprise to the maximum extent possible so that when there is something that is truly urgent or something that really in no way could be foreseen, that we don't have to worry about all these other things where maybe if we had just taken a step back or thought a little bit more about it, we could have anticipated that and reduced it versus like a genuine surprise. I think the other thing is, again, just being really disciplined or being in any way disciplined comes with practice. So being mindful, being very specific about what is the time that you're setting for yourself and, allowing yourself the opportunity to reset. And I think, again, that goes back to why that tip on, the 10-minute tidy is so important, right? Because it's almost like the physical opportunity to kind of reset. And it's okay to say, hey, this day went totally sideways. I'm now taking that time at the end of the day to kind of clean things up, clear the deck, as it were, kind of just restart fresh the next day, as opposed to, hey, today was really tough and I've now carried that into many other days because my space is a chaos or I didn't finish what I wanted to finish.
Yes. Well, no, saw that.
Thank you. I think this other question on YouTube is tied to just similar to what you just responded to, but not very specific. It has to do with what other measure can be used to avoid procrastination.
That's a tough one. I think, I will give myself mentally the reminder of I need this in a week. And that way I start drafting or I start finalizing or I start working on it before the very last minute. It's also important that it's not just, and I think one of the things to think about is when we're thinking about an event or when we're thinking about a program or we're thinking about an assignment, it's never just I finish what I need to do and then it's done, right? How does what you're doing relate to what other people need to do? So for example, when I was in college, I used to write my term papers 2 weeks before they were due because I wanted to have someone look at them and I wanted to get feedback on my paper before I turned it in and finalized it, right? If I am waiting until the very, very, very last minute, no one is going to read my paper in 24 hours, right? And even if they did, which would be great, if they give me all this feedback and say, hey, you're going in completely the wrong direction, I've now given myself no time to rewrite it or no time to address that feedback. So building in more time is always the best kind of way forward on that. Thinking about what is the absolute deadline I need to have something by, when is a soft deadline of like when I'd like to have it done by, and then just being really flexible with yourself and really generous with yourself in terms of life happens. And sometimes you really will have that paper that you're writing at the very, very last minute.
Thank you very much. Let's go to Uyo. Then we'll head to Meduguri. Uyo, please unmute and ask your question. We'll be back to take more questions from this chat, so be patient.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. I appreciate your lectures. So, but of the two time management techniques you had addressed, that is the Pomodoro technique and Eisenhower metrics. I would like for you to share some extra light on the Eisenhower metric time management technique, please, and how this applies to working smart. Thank you.
Sure. So Eisenhower matrix is about how do you prioritize, how do you look through what your workload is, right? And so if you're saying, like, for example, if my goal is to read, I'll go back to reading 50 books, right? If my goal is to read 50 books, then maybe I say, okay, this is, and in 1 year, right? So that's smart in that it's specific. I'm reading 50 books, it's time bound. So that's the T, right? It's within 1 year, it's measurable, and that I can literally count the number of books I've read. It's achievable. I think it's achievable based on my reading pace. And I think it's relevant because I want to read more, right? So I have my SMART goal. I'm going to read 50 books in a year. When I am thinking about what does that look like, how do I break that down, right? It is what allows me to kind of keep focused on that. So if I say to myself, okay, it's the weekend, I have a block of time on my schedule where I said, I'm going to read my book because I want to keep on this schedule of reading 50 books per year or for this year. And then say, again, we'll use the sick family members. The sick family member comes up and I need to figure out what I'm going to do. So for me, it's important to take care of my family member. And if someone's sick, it's usually pretty urgent. So I'm going to do that, right? For reading my book, that's not something I can delegate, right? It's not something I can ask someone else to do. But maybe I say, okay, while I'm taking care of my sick family member, in order to keep track, maybe I will read this as an ebook instead, or I'll listen to it as an audiobook. So maybe, taking care of my sick family member means being at the house while they're sick. Maybe it's I have to go to the hospital and sit with them while they're sick, whatever that looks like. And I won't be able to read, as I wanted to with my dedicated time. So maybe I can delegate it to a different source, or maybe I can build it into the activity. Or maybe I say, hey, you know what? This is important to me, but it's not urgent. The most urgent thing is taking care of my family member. So then I will say, I'm going to schedule a new time that I will dedicate for this week to reading my book, because taking care of my family member is more important and I can't do both, and I can't figure out a way to make them both work. The other option is to say, you know what, for this week, I just am not going to be able to read my book, and I'm going to remove that time that I've allocated for this week from my schedule, and I will look at trying to pick back up my habit or pick back up my schedule next week. Does that help work through what that matrix looks like for how to interact or overlap with SMART?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, Meduguri, please unmute and ask your question.
Thank you, ma'am. My question is, how can I avoid potential drawback in digital environment? That is the question.
Could you expand on what you mean by that?
Yes, potential drawback, like in case of like distractions, self-reliance. How can I avoid that in digital environment?
So, I mean, I think we covered some of the distraction blocking mechanisms, but I think also part of it goes back to just how are you prioritizing things and how are you kind of giving yourself the discipline of what that looks like, right? So, I think about this a lot in terms of I have two phones. I think a lot of people in Nigeria have two phones. One of my phones is my personal phone, and one of my phones is my work phone. And I check my work phone a lot, right? I'm always worried about something coming up, and I then end up seeing something coming through, and I'm like, oh, let me respond to that right away. Some of which is urgent, and some of which is not, right? But trying to instill the discipline of, hey, you know what? I need some time away from work. If something is truly, truly urgent, someone will call me rather than emailing me. And so, in that case, I'm going to say, you know what, once I go home, once I leave the office, I'm going to commit myself to checking my phone maybe twice. If someone needs to urgently reach me, they will call me. But otherwise, these are the two times I'm going to check my phone, and just making that a discipline, making that a habit. And so giving yourself that same space of how do you kind of create for you the way that you want to engage with the technology, to engage with the digital tool, is really, really important. And then giving yourself grace if you slip up, right? And very often I do slip up, or saying, great, I've reinforced the habit that I'm only going to check twice, and today I was successful in only checking twice.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you very much. Let's head to American Center. American Center Abuja, please unmute and ask your question.
Thank you very much for such a wonderful presentation. So I want to ask of it from this perspective, right? Now that we have different type of AI that does different things, I'm wondering now, assuming I have a bulk of a document to analyze, and I decide to leverage on a certain AI to simplify the key points for me so as to save me time of reading everything at once. Is it safe to categorize that as a time management skill? And that's aside. On the flip side, assuming also I have social media posts to make, and I decide to, ahead of time, schedule the post across other platforms so as to free up anything that may pops up. Should that also be categorized as a time management technique? If yes, why? Thank you.
Interesting. So I'll go to your first question first. I think it depends on how much risk you're willing to take, right? So, if you're like, I have a lot of documents that I need to read, and I just want AI to take a look at them and summarize them for me, and I am confident that the AI that I've picked is going to do that job correctly, and I don't want to test to see if that's accurate or not, then yeah, I guess that can be a time saver. And maybe even you say, okay, I'm going to do a couple test articles and see how it does. And then I'm going to do the comparison and say, okay, using this AI tool, when I asked it to summarize this article, it seemed to be, and then I read the article, like the summary seemed to be pretty accurate. So on that basis, I'm comfortable, kind of taking that as the kind of the go-to AI for when I'm looking to summarize things, and I'm comfortable with the margin of error that might arise from that, then yeah, I think that can be a time saver. If, on the other hand, this is something that's really, really, really important, like, for example, if you're submitting something to the US Embassy and you want to make sure that it is absolutely perfect, maybe then you don't rely so heavily on AI because you want to make sure that what you're writing is really, really accurate, and you don't want to take that risk that the summary is not going to be a reflection of, the summary or what you're putting together, or even what you're asking it to draft is not going to be accurate for what you can and can't do. So I think it's only as productive as you let it be. And I think it goes back to, again, how do you still maintain that human review, that human oversight of what is being generated, and how are you going back to say, what's the basis for how this was developed, right? Again, I think, a lot of the AIs that I've worked with are always trying to please you. And sometimes that can be coming up with information that doesn't really exist, that kind of just is put together and you don't really understand where the sourcing is for that. On your second question, I guess I don't quite understand it. So maybe I'll ask if you can reframe it.
Okay, thank you. So to reframe, I was asking if we could we do a lot of posts on our platforms, and that can actually be challenging. It requires time. It requires you to sit down, plan the post, know how to. So I am asking if ahead of time we schedule on some of these platforms, you can schedule a post, and once it just hits the time, it will upload itself. So that saves you the time of, so that's what I was asking, if that's also a method we could consider as a strategy for management of time.
Sure, thanks. So I think it definitely can be one that is a time management consideration. I think, the other thing to think about is also, like, how does that work with when you're trying to do things in a deliberate fashion, right? So if you're talking about not even just as a time management consideration, but if you're like, hey, I know that my audience tends to be on social media at X time, and I want to make sure that my post is what they're going to see when they log on, and I'm not going to be free at that time, that can be something that basically allows you to post content while you're doing something else. The other thing that can be good for, and I guess maybe pulling it back into like an email or something like that, is, a lot of email platforms allow you to schedule your emails, so it doesn't have to be the minute that you draft it, you press send and it sends. You can do a delayed send, and so that can also be helpful too. And I think that, to me, that also is a time management one, because it helps manage the time for your team as well. I confess I'm not super disciplined about that. It's something that I'm working on. I want my team to be able to disconnect after work hours unless there's a true emergency. One of the ways to do that is, even if I'm working late, I don't want them to feel like they have to be checking their email multiple times at night. I want them to feel like they can have the time that they need to do their personal lives and reset for the next day. And so scheduling my email to be sent in the morning, even if I'm working late at night, so that way I don't have to have it on my plate. I know that it's going to be going to them, but it doesn't have to be something that evening, because I don't actually need them to take action on it that evening, can also be a really great time management skill. So playing with when you post things or playing with when you send things, I think is definitely a time management tool that can be really effective.
Thank you so much, Raisa. I think Samuel Ita has a question as well.
One of the participants.
Okay, please.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Elbina. I want to ask this question as a means of tapping into your wealth of experience. You talk of reading books. When you read books, some of the books don't have the same level of content and volumes. For instance, you have a target of reading 3 books in a week. Sometimes the kind of book you read can speed you up, and you read fast and meet up with the target of the 3 books in a week. In a situation where you have maybe out of the 3 books, you have a voluminous book, and then you don't have that morale, that speed, how do you handle it? So that's my question.
That's an interesting question. And I think it goes back to, there's a couple ways to kind of Ooh, power cut. There's a couple ways to play with that. So I think one is you can challenge yourself from the beginning in terms of the goal that you set for yourself. So we said that my goal was I'm going to read 50 books in a year as a SMART goal, but it's equally a SMART goal to say I'm going to read 50 books where each book is at least 300 pages. And I'm going to achieve that in a year, right? That's still a SMART goal. It's still measurable. But I've now just like increased the level of difficulty. I've put myself to that challenge of how do I make sure that I'm reading sufficiently complex books, right? And then I think, again, part of what we're talking about is how am I actively making conscious decisions? So if in 1 week I'm saying, you know what, it's really, really, really busy, it's insanely busy at the office, or, I don't know if people saw this past weekend, we had Pipeline Vocal Project, a US a cappella group here in Abuja, and I was working with my team on that project. I was doing a lot of work during the weekend. So I didn't really have as much time to read as I wanted. So maybe I say, okay, for my hour this week, rather than challenging myself to read an entire book, I'm only going to read an hour's worth just because I want to have that practice of reading every hour, reading 1 hour every weekend. But then I say, okay, so this week I didn't get to finish the book. So maybe next week I will finish the book, or maybe this week I chose a longer book and I'll have to read that over 3 weeks. And the next time I'll pick a really short book so that I can stay on track, but I can, be disciplined about having that time commitment for what I'm trying to do. So it allows you to kind of, again, having the goal and forcing yourself to be really specific about what your goal is really allows you to develop the discipline of what are you actually trying to achieve, and then how are you making conscious decisions about what you're trying to do to achieve that goal.
Okay. So we have Dulce. Can you unmute and ask your question?
Okay. Good afternoon to you all. My name is Umar from America. My question is, what role do you think artificial intelligence and productivity will play in enhancing productivity for international cooperation? And the next is, how can we ensure that digital productivity without compromising data security or sensitivity information?
So I had a little bit of difficulty understanding your question, or hearing your question, I should say. So I want to make sure I understand the question. I think the first part was talking about how do I see AI and productivity working in international settings? Is that right?
Yes. Artificial intelligence and automation will play in enhancing productivity for international cooperation.
International operations. So I think different organizations look at AI in different ways, and I think looking at international operations depends on how you define it. So I guess the bottom line is it depends. I think a lot of companies, a lot of multinational companies, so I think that that's a form of international operations, are experimenting with AI in terms of their customer service, in terms of their order fulfillment, right? And so those are kind of examples that come to mind. When I think about, how I look at AI, a lot of times it is, summarize this document, or, what are the key points from this document? It's, how do I basically take things that I've written and distill them down? And I would say that that is something that is increasing my productivity. Or, alternatively, I could say, here are the criteria for this, and here's what I've written. How do these align, right? Like, what's the gap analysis, right? So the work that I'm doing as a diplomat is international by nature, right? And increasing my my effectiveness and my productivity comes from being able to take large quantities of information, or take information that I'm working on and look at where there are gaps. So I think that those are a couple of examples that come to mind of kind of where I see that now. And then I think in the future, I think it's just going to be looking at that more and more intensely and seeing kind of, does it mean looking at, more data? Does it look at, making more complex decisions more simpler to process? I think another example can be also as AI evolves in terms of language, right? So being able to transcend native language versus other language and looking at information or information resources. So maybe I don't necessarily speak that language, but maybe I can, like for example, I don't speak Yoruba. I had something that I needed to look at in Yoruba, so I was able to work with a colleague here to say, what is a Yoruba language search that relates to this topic? And she says, okay, here's the word in Yoruba that you're looking for, able to put that in AI and see kind of what comes from that. And, then go back and work together on, okay, is this really related to what I'm looking for or not? So those types of things of helping you kind of pull information and distill information in a way that still requires that overview, that still requires that human touch, I think is going to continue to be an area to innovate and an area for the future.
All right. Thank you. So we have, I'll take some questions on the chat box while I'll give the floor to Dan. We have American Corner Calabar. Just hold on. So we have a question on the chat box. Say the 5-sentence email, what does it really talk about and how can it be improved?
It's a great question. So the 5-sentence email can be about anything, right? And it's about creating the practice of being disciplined and putting up front what is the most important thing. So a lot of times I get email where someone says, hi, my name is so-and-so, and they give me 3 paragraphs of background about them. And then they say, here's something about my organization. And there are 3 paragraphs about their organization. And then they'll say, and this is an event I'm doing. And they'll have 2 paragraphs about their event. And then at the very bottom of a 10-paragraph email, or that's whatever, 8-paragraph email, they'll say, please let me know how the embassy can help. So that is a lot of reading. That is a lot of time that I've spent trying to understand, why is this email in my inbox? What does this person want? A 5-sentence email could be as something as clear as, hi, I'm so-and-so and I need your help with X. And then below that is maybe 2-3 sentences about what I'm doing, why I need your help, or what I'm hoping to get out of it, and what's in it for you. Right? So it can be that discipline. So for example, even yesterday, I sent my boss an email saying, hi, I need your help with figuring out this problem. Here's the background. Looking forward to your feedback, right? So he doesn't have to go reading through all this background to try to figure out what am I actually looking for. And writing that tightly really helps you be productive, because it really helps you crystallize, what are you actually trying to say? What are you actually trying to do? What are you actually trying to get? And they've actually done studies. Like if you Google, you can look at, they've done studies where they have a camera, like a neurological camera for someone's head as they're reading email. And it shows, like, when you have the first 3 lines, 4 lines, it's red hot because your attention is immediately drawn to those first 3, 4 lines of an email. And then it shows it goes ice cold because people are, that's too long and people are just glazing through, racing through as quickly as possible. So you can actually see, you can track the brain's reaction as they're reading if the email goes on and on and on. And if your first paragraph is not interesting or not relevant, and that's the key point in my brain where I'm focused on what you're asking, and I don't even finish reading your email, or I don't even really absorb your email, that's not an effective communication. And so that's not a productive communication.
Thank you very much, Raisa. So we have another question from YouTube. Says, do say, what are the main challenges diplomats encounter in maintaining productivity and the usage of digital tools in our digital world? So
that's such a broad question. I feel like that's a whole separate presentation. I mean, I won't speak for all diplomats. I will speak for myself, which is, I think, a common thing is there's so much information and there are so many resources. And so it's really trying to figure out what are the most reliable resources, what information is most of use, and where can I understand that this is accurate information? And being able to kind of sort through what is the most useful is, I think, the biggest challenge. And then I think the other piece is just, again, how do you maintain that discipline of trying to carve out as much space so that you're deliberately going through the day as possible, as opposed to just that your day just kind of takes over and all these things kind of happen where you're running in a million different directions and you finish the day saying, I didn't do anything that I thought I was going to do today. And sometimes that can be really great, and sometimes that can be really fun, but sometimes that can also be that, hey, I didn't really plan this well, or I wasn't really intentional about what I wanted to do or needed to do today.
Okay, so we have another one from YouTube. Say, how can I design a unified productivity system that integrates task management, time tracking, knowledge management, and habit tracking without overlap? I think this person is a programmer working on
Yeah,
an
I was going
app.
to say, when someone figures that out, let me know, and I would be happy to test it for you for free.
I think
it goes back
Prof
to
will take that.
Yeah,
it will develop
maybe. I
one
look forward
for
to
us.
that. Maybe I put that as a challenge. By the time I leave Nigeria, someone should design this app. But I think in all seriousness, I've not found one app that perfectly does everything that I'm looking for it to do. And so, again, I think part of finding that kind of productivity system is like, what is your personal productivity system? What works best for you across the different apps or across your personal space, and what doesn't work? And so giving yourself that kind of time to experiment and see which of these applications is most useful, which of them covers the things that I'm most interested in, I think is kind of the most important. And again, playing with this and kind of playing with what you want to do is really critical. And if you design that app, let me know. And again, I'm so happy to test it for you.
Okay.
Josephine, you're on mute.
Okay. We have a question from Calabar. How can digital productivity help free up more time for rest, family, and creativity? Then the second one, how can AI shape the future of digital productivity in our lives?
So I think the first question, digital productivity is, again, for me, it's about kind of how do I create that space for myself and how do I be deliberate in this? And so it's literally like, it can be as basic as I'm literally going to schedule every night from like 6 to 7, I will not be available on any tools. That's time that I've blocked for my family. Or, for me, I live in Nigeria. The rest of my family lives in the United States. So maybe it's saying, once a week, we are going to dedicate specific time when that's the time I can't schedule anything else, because that's the time I'm going to be on a Zoom call with my family. Similarly, you can create that block of time where you're saying, I am going to be creative in this moment. So a friend of mine is a diplomat. He's based in Cameroon. He has committed himself the challenge of writing one like blog post, like substantial long form written blog post a day about his experiences as a diplomat. It's something that he started when we were posted in Beirut many years ago. And he does that every day. And so he literally, has time that he sets aside every day where he's going to work on that. And so that's his creative time that he has kind of, maybe he doesn't use time blocking, but he has set aside time. I like the physical, like, reminder on my calendar of this is time that I've blocked away. Not everyone does, not everyone needs that, but I like it. But he has that dedicated time that he's giving himself of that he's going to write. In the States, there's an opportunity, like I think it's the month of February, that it's like a competition where people can like sign up and basically give themselves the goal of once a day writing 2 to 3 pages with the idea of producing a significant inroad of a novel during that month. And there's like, you can sign up. So it's like a community of people that are all doing this. And again, that's like you've time blocked that. You've committed yourself to once a day, I'm going to do this, and once a day I'm going to write, and that's your creativity.
So we
On
have
the second question, I feel like we kind of already touched that, so maybe I'll skip that one.
Okay. So we have another one. What is the culture of productivity? And can you please elaborate on the Pomodoro technique?
Sure. So I'll take the second one first, and unfortunately this will have to be my last question because we're over time and I have another meeting and my time block is telling me you have a meeting. But the Pomodoro technique again is you have a task and you break it up into 25-minute increments. So you set a timer, you work on something for 25 minutes, you take a 5-minute break, you do that multiple rounds. So let's say your task is it's Saturday and I'm going to clean my house. So I'm going to set my timer and I'm going to clean my bathroom for 25 minutes. When the timer goes off, no matter where I am in cleaning my bathroom, I'm going to stop and I'm going to give myself a 5-minute break. And if I need another 25 minutes to clean my bathroom, you know, after my 5-minute break, I'm going to come back in and I'm going to set the timer for again another 25 minutes. And then when the 5 minutes stops, excuse me, when the 25 minutes stops, I'm going to take a break for another 5 minutes. And so maybe it takes me an hour to clean my bathroom because I've done 50-minute blocks broken into two 25-minute blocks with 5-minute breaks. So that's an hour's worth of cleaning. I say, okay, so I'm doing two Pomodoro rotations for cleaning my bathroom, and now I'm going to move to the kitchen. So again, I set my timer for 25 minutes for the kitchen. Timer goes off. Now I'm giving myself a 5-minute break. And then after you've done 4 rounds, when you stop at the fourth increment of 25, you give yourself 30 minutes of a break. So a bit of a longer break before you dive back in. And then in terms of the culture of productivity, I think it's basically, I see that as the idea that productivity, that positive habits, that motivation, and having support systems is what's necessary to achieve goals, and that figuring out what works best for you is what makes something natural and sustainable.
Over to you, Daniel.
Okay. Thank you so much, Raisa. I wish we can have you here every day on all of our programs, because I actually like the fact that you're able to actually make every of our majority of our audience very comfortable in terms of how you are able to explain each item one after another and make it very easy for anyone to comprehend. We really do appreciate you. Please, let's put hands together for Raisa. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're definitely
pleasure.
gonna ask you to come back over and over again. You've done so well today. We really do appreciate you. Thank you,
Thanks
everyone.
so much.
Thank you so much for joining our program for today across our network of American Spaces here in Nigeria. We appreciate you all. We hope that you keep a date with us. We'll see you again, same time next week. Bye, everyone.